why not a crow?
We are Candor Talk Live, the new progressive raw talk show discussing current hot political and social topics. The host is Dicey, www.candortalk.com.
All right. Good morning, actually, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually 12:36 in the morning, so that's why I'm saying good morning. I was supposed to do a show at 11 o'clock last night. Unfortunately, I had a lot of work to do, so I could not do a show. But anyway, this is Candor Talk Live. I'm your host, Dicey. And today, what we're going to be talking about is Donald Trump's joint session speech. But before I get into Donald Trump's joint session speech, I think it's important that I provide people with some kind of background information on what is a sociopath. And the reason why I think it's important to talk about what a sociopath is because it will help you understand exactly why I am saying what I am saying and why I'm going to analyze Trump's speech the way that I'm analyzing it. So listen to what they say here about what a sociopath is. And once you hear what they say what a sociopath is, I'll get back on here and I'll tell you why I think that's important. All right, here we go.
Who doesn't have the ability to think about anyone else's feelings, to have their own feelings. They are invested in getting what they want at any price. And oftentimes they do. They pretty much think through their life. It's very cognitive how they operate. Very devious. When you're sitting with a sociopath, you're entertained by the story, totally engulfed in it, enamored by it, shocked by most of the details. And when they leave, it's as though you've just had an empty hour. There's nothing that stays behind. They can be much more creative than the rest of us. They have no limitations, no boundaries. They can think whatever they want, and they can do whatever they want. It's a quality because they get a lot of things that they want. They are able to dissociate from what they feel. And dissociation is one of the psychoanalytic terms, which means that you have feelings and you have thoughts. And what you feel and what you think have very little to do with each other. And you can think about it as though they're two islands. Emotions, one island, cognitions, the other island. And they're separated by a great deal of water. With a true sociopath, there's no boat that gets across and coming back and forth. There's nothing that is going to unite the two. They're that far apart. And they've had to do that in order to separate early on from their emotions in order to survive their family of origin. So when they grow up, they're lacking. They're lacking emotions. They know how to fake them, but they don't know how to feel them. They usually are extraordinarily distant from what they feel. I think that most pathologies are qualities. We all feel at different times that we're not liked, and we work very hard to make people like us, and we work very hard to be as intelligent as we can be and become as much as we can become. They can live in a fantasy because they make up their own world, and their fantasy is their reality. For most of us, we don't really think that way. They take on their fantasy as though it's their entire world, where we can move from reality and fantasy, but we do know the difference between the two. We can't really be creative unless we have the ability to fantasize. So in a way, that gives a sociopath an edge. You have to admire that. You have to admire what they go through and then what they become. To be able to develop a defense against a chaotic family, you've got to have something inside of you that's more powerful than what the rest of us have. And they make it. They survive it. That's a strength.
Okay. I don't agree with the analysis that some of the sociopathic people have some kind of survivor instinct and should be somehow viewed as heroic. I'm not necessarily of the opinion that she's accurate on that, but what I do agree with her on is that there are some certain traits that you can associate with certain people, and those traits of sociopathy are very, very prevalent in Donald Trump. And yesterday, after people heard his speech, a lot of people did not realize that just because Donald Trump seemed to show at a certain point some compassion and he was well coached and he was reading off a teleprompter, people did not realize that it was really a sociopath at work. It was a person who lacks empathy, who has the inability to feel real emotions. And the problem with a sociopath is that they do things that are so damaging to other people. But what happens is that a normal person is more prone to want to forgive that person. Because anger and animosity, it takes a lot of work. I mean, you literally have to invest in that particular anger and animosity. So it definitely takes a lot of work. And so sometimes people just don't really want to have to deal with all that anger. So they would rather forgive you. And then there are some people who don't mind being abused as long as the abuse stops at some point. So basically, after Trump's speech, there were pundits all over the mainstream media basically saying that this was a pivot, this is the change, Donald Trump, this is what we've been waiting for. All of these, accolades basically for this particular speech. And one person really struck out to me, which was Van Jones. Because Van Jones is a commentator for CNN. And yesterday he had said something. He's a liberal, also, let that be known. Yesterday he had said something in reference to Donald Trump's speech, which I found to be quite perplexing. And I'm going to play the clip from Van Jones right now so you can actually hear what he said for yourself, and then you can decide for yourself whether or not, hold on a second, whether or not what Van Jones particularly said was a good thing or a bad thing, or whether or not you agree with me when I say that what Van Jones said in this particular clip is pretty frustrating. So right now I'm going to play the clip. Unfortunately, you're going to have to hear an ad real quickly, but after that ad is over, the clip will play, and then I'll get back and we'll talk about it. All right, here it goes.
Recently, something extraordinary happened at Raymore and Flanagan. When the Smithville School came to perform in our store, it brought us together, not as sales associates and customers, but as neighbors.
We are blessed to be joined tonight by Corinne Owens, the widow of U.S. Navy Special Operator, Senior Chief William Ryan Owens. Ryan died as he lived, a warrior and a hero, battling against terrorism and securing our nation.
He became president of the United States in that moment, period. There are a lot of people who have a lot of reason to be frustrated with him, to be fearful of him, to be mad at him. But that was one of the most extraordinary moments you have ever seen in American politics, period. And he did something extraordinary. And for people who have been hoping that he would become unified, hoping that he might find some way to become presidential, they should be happy with that moment. For people who have been hoping that maybe he would remain a divisive cartoon, which he often finds a way to do, they should begin to become a little bit worried tonight. Because that thing you just saw him do, if he finds a way to do that over and over again, he's going to be there for 8 years. Now, there is a lot that he said in that speech that was counterfactual, that was not right, that I oppose and will oppose. But he did something tonight that you cannot take away from him. He became president of the United States.
Okay, there's Van Jones basically after Donald Trump's speech saying that Donald Trump became the president of the United States after that particular speech. And what's frustrating to me about what Van Jones said is that why I played that clip in the very beginning about sociopaths is because Van Jones just got conned by a sociopath. Donald Trump did not pivot last night. You can't just erase, years of inflammatory comments, bigotry, misogyny, demagoguery, racism. You can't just erase those things and negate those things because somebody decided to say something that may sound like it's humane. The one thing about someone like Donald Trump is that he didn't even care about the widow. He wasn't concerned about her. She was just a prop for him to push forth an agenda and for him to make himself look humane. The reality is, if he cared about the widow, and mind you, Ryan's widow is a victim of Donald Trump because Ryan was lost in the mission supported and endorsed basically by Donald Trump. So what makes me really mad about what Van Jones did is that Van Jones basically negated all the negative things that Donald Trump has said in the past and said that one particular moment in which he said some good things about Ryan made him presidential. Now let's also look at the fact that what he said about Ryan in that particular time was also to mitigate the damage that has been caused by his failed mission that caused Ryan to lose his life in Yemen. According to Ryan's father, it's one of those situations where he doesn't understand because, and the deceased soldier is Ryan Owens. What his father does not understand is they weren't putting boots on the ground in Yemen. All of a sudden they put boots on the ground and they lose a life and they lose civilians in that entire situation. So Donald Trump brings in the widow to try to make it seem like we've patched up that particular issue. There's no reason to continue to investigate it. That's really why she was there. Now, she became overwhelmed with emotions. It was such a sad situation to see her that way. I mean, you could see the pain just seeping out of her and her just being overcome by the moment. But that was not Donald Trump who had created that, who had made her feel so overwhelmed. It was all those people in there who stood up and applauded her, and she just became completely, encompassed in that pain. That was not because Donald Trump did something that was so presidential. Now, mind you, to be the president of the United States, it specifically outlined in the Constitution what your duties and obligations are. I don't think that's one of them. To become presidential of the United States, you need to be able to lead. And if you're saying that that was him showing true leadership, that's no different. That's not necessarily leadership. Just because you're able to exploit and extort basically someone else's pain and grief for your own benefit doesn't make you more presidential. Not to mention, I feel like he undermined all the work that has been being done to resist this kind of agenda that Donald Trump was putting forth. Not to mention the things that Donald Trump said in his particular speech that should have made people completely worried about what was about the direction that Donald Trump wanted to take the country in. Not to mention Donald Trump never apologizes or has never apologized for any of the stuff that he has done and said. And he just says, come on now, let's just all unify. As if it doesn't matter what he says, doesn't matter what he does. And Van Jones fell for it. Van Jones saw a guy who seemed like he may be disciplined. Now, I'll give Trump this. He was capable of staying on message. He was much more polished. He was much more sophisticated in his delivery of his own particular message. But that's about it. You cannot say that you looked at this individual and you said, oh, this person became the president of the United States in that particular moment. So for me, I found that to be greatly offensive. And the reason why, in addition to all the things I was just saying, is that Donald Trump has said some very inflammatory things. And I think people continue to forget the things that he has actually said himself out of his own mouth. The things that he has said over this entire campaign season, the campaign season, and as he's been president, the things that he's actually said that have not at all been atoned for. And the fact that he hasn't atoned for those things, I don't understand how you can say he became presidential because he was able to read off of a teleprompter. I also feel like it sets the bar so low that all you have to be able to do is not basically wet the bed, wet your pants while you're standing up there and giving a speech if you're Donald Trump, and all of a sudden you have pivoted. That's just completely ridiculous, guys. It makes no sense. And Van Jones, while I respect his his right to be able to put forth any particular opinion he has, I respect it. He has a right to say that. My problem with what he did is it feels like he didn't make a rational analysis about what had transpired. He just became overcome and overwhelmed by the particular moment. He wasn't necessarily thinking about the totality of the circumstances and everything that had transpired. It was one moment that he now said, okay, you've become the president of the United States. How is that even possible? And you know why it's important for you guys to listen to what, it's important for me to play the things that, and elaborate on the things that he basically said and why this is important, is because Van Jones basically pretended as though none of the things that Donald Trump has said in the past ever happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind people of some of the things that he has said in the past. I'm going to play a clip that goes through some of the offensive things that he has said in the past, and I want people to listen to that. And when you listen to this clip, then you'll realize why it's very frustrating to me and to anybody else who hears people sitting here, CNN, MSNBC, all those networks, sitting there saying that Donald Trump had pivoted after all the things that this guy has said. You can't pretend like his rhetoric didn't cause damage. But anyway, let me play the clip of some of the offensive things Donald Trump has said, because it seems like people have forgotten exactly who Donald Trump is and exactly the kind of damage Donald Trump has done. So let me just play this clip real quick.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
Trump retweeted a racially charged graphic that overstates homicides committed by African Americans.
Trump retweeted a tweet showing a swastika next to the Bush family.
The tweet also included Jeb in a mariachi outfit.
Trump retweeted someone who claims to live in Jew-America.
I have a great relationship with the blacks. I've always had a great relationship with the blacks.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
You have sacrificed nothing and no one.
He said you wouldn't have even let his son in America.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know that. I saw him. He was, very emotional and probably looked like a nice guy to me. His wife, if you look at his wife, she was standing there. She had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say. You tell me, but plenty of people have written that.
She gets out and she starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions. And, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes. Blood coming out of her wherever, but she was, in my opinion, she was off base.
Nobody came in.
Let me say this.
Sure.
Brandy came in here, she got down on her knees and said, I'm passionate, I want to do this. I, at this point, am the team chooser, not the team leader yet.
Excuse me, you dropped to your knees.
Yes.
And begged to do this. And I said, I'm looking around the room, and we had even LaToya, who sat beside me, thought maybe Brandy was
must be a
right.
pretty picture you dropped.
John and Dennis thought I should be. Omarosa said me. Some other people said you. And in the end of it, I said,
I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird. Stop. You know what? You are sick. Yeah. Well,
Okay, so those are just some of the things that Donald Trump has said in the past. Okay, so we can all sit here and pretend as though those things did not occur, and we can pretend as though those things are not relevant anymore because somehow he's done this pivot at 70 years old. He's now some new individual who doesn't think the way that he thought in the past. And this past that we're talking about is like a year ago, or maybe even less than a year ago. But let's just pretend like some of that stuff just didn't really matter. But these are some of the things that this guy has said, and that is just a small percentage of the things that this guy has said over the last few years that are just inflammatory to the core. And some of those things are obviously from clips before he started running for president, like what he said about Ivanka, about how if she wasn't his daughter, he'd probably be dating her. Which is just very sick and perverted. But nevertheless, that's what he said. But if you heard the things he said, the blacks, I have a good relationship with the blacks. I don't know any black person who wants to be called part of the blacks. If you're really close with black people, then you wouldn't be calling us the blacks, right? So clearly you don't have a good relationship with the blacks. Then, what he said about Mexican people. Did we just forget what he said about Mexican people? The fact that he's saying that some of them are rapists, some of them may be good people, that are sending over rapists, and etc. Are we supposed to just forget about that? The fact that he wants to build this wall on the southern border, but he doesn't care anything about the northern border? The fact that he wants to shut down all Muslims from coming to the United States, then he implements this travel ban that's a total disaster. People are literally flooding airports in order to protest what he's doing. We had to get attorney generals getting involved, suing him in court, and they beat him. You understand? This has become the ACLU had to get involved. Do we forget that? The Khan family, in which he insulted the Khan family and tried to pretend like the Khan family was upset with Trump because maybe the guy was just emotional. And then he says something about the mother not likely being able to talk, which is just basically a stereotype about Muslim people. Do we just want to forget all these things that he has said and done? Is that what we're supposed to do now? Is that what Van Jones is now telling us? That those things don't matter? That he is, because he came and gave a speech, he came and gave you a bunch of words that don't translate into any kind of action, that all of a sudden all those things that he said should be forgotten? And the thing is, a classic sign of a sociopath, and the reason why I brought in sociopath in the very beginning, is this exact thing right here. Pretending as though you've changed because you've done so much damage and people weren't tolerating it. It's just like an abusive relationship. You tell the person you're going to walk away. And then the person all of a sudden becomes on their best behavior until they find you being complacent again. And once you're complacent again, then they go back to being exactly who they are before they acted like they had this epiphany. That's what he's doing right now. That's what he did in that speech, was to pretend like he changed. Because he's the ultimate con artist. And I'm going to play part of his speech, just some of the things that he offered in his speech. Because the reason why I think it's important to talk about some of the things he offered in his speech, so I can tell you why I don't care what you thought about his tone. You need to get serious about what this guy is saying about his own particular policies. His own policies that could affect all of us. Okay? So yeah, he may have said some nice things and, brought up a Navy SEAL that was unfortunately killed because of his own ineptitude. He may have been able to do that, but the reality of the situation, that doesn't negate all the damage and stuff like that he has done over time, and doesn't negate the things that he is saying are his policies. So, all right, right now I'm going to play basically a real quick summation of what he said at this joint session speech. And then I'm going to get back and talk about it. All right. Play it now.
Imperfect.
I am here tonight to deliver a message of unity and strength, and it is a message deeply delivered from my heart. We want all Americans to succeed, but that can't happen in an environment of lawless chaos. We must restore integrity and the rule of law at our borders. It is not compassionate, but reckless to allow uncontrolled entry from places where proper vetting cannot occur. But to accomplish our goals at home and abroad, we must restart the engine of the American economy, making it easier for companies to do business in the United States and much, much harder for companies to leave our country. Protecting our workers also means reforming our system of legal immigration. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades. The time has come for a new program of national rebuilding. This effort will be guided by two core principles: Buy American and Hire American. Tonight, I am also calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare. Obamacare is collapsing, and we must act decisively to protect all Americans. We are blessed to be joined tonight by Corinne Owens, the widow of U.S. Navy Special Operator, Senior Chief William Ryan Owens. Ryan's legacy is etched into eternity. Thank you. But we know that America is better off when there is less conflict, not more. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. America is willing to find new friends and to forge new partnerships where shared interests align. We want harmony and stability, not war and conflict. The time for small thinking is over. The time for trivial fights is behind us. We just need the courage to share the dreams that fill our hearts, the bravery to express the hopes that stir our souls, and the confidence to turn those hopes and those dreams into action.
Okay, so here you can obviously see and hear basically a quick summation of what Donald Trump had said yesterday during his joint session speech. I'm going to take a quick break now. Just for the record, our shows from now on are not going to be longer than 20 minutes or so. This show is going to be a little bit longer because I really wanted to delve into what I thought was a really important issue. Because now that I see people are joining on this bandwagon and saying he's pivoted, etc., I think it's important that we all come back to reality. We saw a sociopath at their best on Tuesday. That's what we saw. We saw a sociopath that was able to manipulate and con individuals into believing the person changed when they really did not. So anyway, I'm going to take a quick break because we've been on here for a while. And then when we come back, I'm going to talk about why I think that you cannot sit here and say that Trump's speech was a good speech. If you're a liberal or progressive, you definitely can't say that. If you're an American and you care about the fundamental principles of this country, the way society has grown and our universal shared understanding of the culture in this country, if you care about those things, you can't support what he's saying right now. So anyway, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about Trump's speech from Candor Talk's perspective. We'll be right back.
Are you guys ready? It's the two.
Some people have claimed that our third molars, commonly referred to as wisdom teeth, often cause trouble in modern humans because our mouths are smaller than our supposed evolutionary ancestors. However, impacted wisdom teeth don't afflict all ethnic groups. Numerous people groups today have plenty of room in their jaws to accommodate their third molars. Modern dental research has shown that diet is a major factor in jaw development. In non-technological cultures, impacted wisdom teeth are almost unknown. Their tougher diet exercises their jaw muscles more, and this helps their jaws develop properly. The tougher diet also results in tooth wear, and the normal compensation for this wear involves the gradual migration of teeth towards the front of the mouth, thus creating more room for the third molars. However, the modern diet of soft, processed foods does not promote proper jaw development, which can lead to impacted wisdom teeth. So, impacted wisdom teeth do not support evolutionary storytelling.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com. Preview. Preview.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us. I am back from the break. And before the break, what I played for you was a summation of Trump's speech to the Congress. So basically, joint session speech. And the reason why, let me just preface what I'm about to say by saying this. I think that his demeanor was a lot better, but I think his message was shit. And I also feel that he is a sociopath, and I saw a sociopath operating at the best level possible. That's what I saw. I did not see somebody who was seeking some kind of redemption. That's not what I saw. I saw somebody who was able to con their way out of having to show any remorse for their actions or show any responsibility for their actions, and found a way to con their way into making people believe that they actually have a heart. For example, Donald Trump says, I'm saying this from my heart. This is a guy who doesn't have a heart. This is a guy who doesn't care about any human being at all but himself. So for him to sit here and pretend like he's saying it from his heart, and if you are saying it from your heart, do you need a teleprompter to tell you that? So he's reading it directly from a teleprompter that's trying to tell him that he's saying it from his heart. This is a guy that if you're saying it from your heart, just say it from your heart. That's not something you should have to write in the teleprompter. The fact that they had to write that in the teleprompter for him to say that this is from the deep bottom part of his heart shows you that we're dealing with a sociopath, somebody who doesn't know what it means to say that they care about something from the bottom of their heart. It's just symbolic gesture, just in order for people to think that he is somehow human. He's just mimicking what is normal human behavior. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know how to have a heart. He doesn't know how to care. That's not something that he is capable of doing. And then he talks about the rule of law at the borders. What does that even mean? Okay, I mean, look, you're going to build this wall. Congratulations to you. You're going to spend all of our money doing that. But you're going to build this wall in order to keep these alleged people out there when you don't have any specific intelligence that's ever told you that that's your threat. And then you have like 40% of the people who are overstaying their visas and becoming a threat in terms of immigration, in terms of losing American jobs or whatever, all that rhetoric they throw out there, are not coming from Mexico. And where's the evidence that immigrants are causing more problems than anyone else? I mean, it's just ridiculous the things he's saying. And he's saying it's not about courage or being compassionate. It is about, but it may not be about those things, but it is about being rational. And this is a guy who's not rational. Then he talks about everything's going to be buy American and hire American. Well, if that's true, then why don't you do that in your own business, Donald Trump? You don't do that in your own business. No, instead, you transfer out your stuff to other individuals, other countries, excuse me. You send it out to other countries, and they manufacture your stuff. You don't do it in American. You don't buy American and hire American and all that stuff. That's not what you're doing. But instead, you're trying to impose that upon other people, and that's why he's a sociopath. And a narcissist, which is something for another day. But he's able to tell people to do what he will not do himself. You know, there's this theory out that Hitler might have been Jewish. You know why that's important? Because Hitler demonized Jewish people. But the reality is, while he may have been Jewish, he was able to convince everybody to hate the Jews. So I might be Jewish, but hate Jewish people. That's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Just because I do it doesn't mean you should do it. And I'm going to make everybody else do what I don't do. How is that in any way some kind of progress? Oh, and another thing that just annoyed me so badly was that it seems like they're just manufactured clapping by the Republicans. I mean, just clapping. Everything he said, every 5 words, they would stand up and clap. It's like that was so manufactured. So I think that was pre-planned. So don't go in there and use the clapping in there as some kind of symbolism to, as some kind of symbolism to him being some kind of transformative figure. He's not. And then he talks about Ryan, Ryan Owens' death. And he talks about Ryan Owens' death being etched into eternity. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you should be able to say that without having to have that read from a teleprompter. Some things you should be able to improvise. I mean, you can improvise a whole lot of other stuff, but you can't improvise that emotion. And so you're reading it. And then after he says, Ryan's memory will be etched into eternity. All he says afterwards is thank you to the widow, because he didn't know what to say next. He doesn't know how to show emotion. And the teleprompter didn't tell him what to say next. So instead of going on and saying, I just want to say personally how proud I am of Ryan for what he did for this country, whatever, he read directly from a teleprompter. And people were giving him props for reading from a teleprompter. The person who should be getting props is Ryan Owens' widow, who's able to stand there in that moment and be able to show her emotions without holding back. It was a beautiful moment, and I'm not going to take that away, but I think that moment goes to her. That does not go to him. He didn't say anything spectacular or anything that was endearing that would make you say, okay, yeah, he's the reason why this particular situation happened. He's the reason why, we were all so overcome by emotion. It was not him. It was her. But instead, all of a sudden, people like Van Jones, CNN, MSNBC, they're transferring her monumental, very powerful moment to him, as if he's the person who should be entitled to gain benefit from her grief. She's the reason why we're sad, not because he decided to call her. This is the thing. Then he talks about immigration, basically denigrating immigrants and basically saying, we need to make everything American first. The reality is, what he's basically saying is that immigrants are our problem. Immigrants are part of our problem. Part of what he said in that speech, which wasn't in that clip that I played, was he went and used an African-American success story. And then all of a sudden, right after talking about an African-American success story, he starts talking about crime in African-American communities. He equates everything black to crime. And it's just becoming so absolutely offensive. He says Obamacare is a disaster. Obamacare, if he decides to repeal and replace it, what it's sounding like Republicans are going to do is going to just destroy millions of Americans. And he's talking about repeal and replace it. It's a disaster. But this guy has absolutely no plan for how to repeal and replace it. They just keep saying the same stupid, repetitive slogan: repeal and replace, repeal and replace, repeal and replace. Replace it then. You said you were going to do it your first day. You didn't do it. Now all of a sudden you keep talking about how much of a disaster it is, but you can't figure out a way to make it not a disaster. I thought you were the greatest, businessman to ever live. Figure it out, but you can't figure it out. But all of a sudden we're supposed to commend him because he said it in a softer tone. And mind you, while he talked about Obamacare being a disaster, he pointed at Nancy Pelosi, essentially basically saying she was a disaster. Because, Trump cannot let any insult go. But this guy is presidential, according to Van Jones. He told 51 lies in 61 minutes. So about every minute and a few seconds, he was telling a lie. That was presidential? The guy who told 51 lies in 61 minutes? That's presidential? That's pretty questionable for someone to say that that's presidential when the president should, at a minimum, when he's talking to the public, tell the truth. But no, this guy tells 51 lies in 61 minutes, but he's very presidential. Then he talks about this news program called Voice. And I'm going to play the clip from what he talked about with his Voice thing, because I think, to me, that was one of the more scary things that he had said. Besides all the other crazy things he did, like using victims as props and, talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare, which we know is going to just affect so many Americans. When he's talking about the rule of law at the board, those things bother me. But this Voice agency or division or whatever it is that he created is scary to me. I want you to listen to what he says about Voice and about this new entity that he is creating for, the American people. To protect victims from undocumented immigrants or whatever. So I'm going to play the clip real quickly. I want you to hear it before we go, any further. And I will summarize this entire Donald Trump speech at the end. Hold on, here.
Rated R.
Police and sheriffs are members of our community. They're friends and neighbors. They're mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. And they leave behind loved ones every day who worry about whether or not they'll come home safe and sound. We must support the incredible men and women of law enforcement. And we must support the victims of crime. I have ordered the Department of Homeland Security to create an office to serve American victims. The office is called VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. We are providing a voice to those who have been ignored by our media and silenced by special interests. Police and sheriff.
Okay. So Donald Trump is basically creating this new agency, basically it's called VOICE, which is going to basically give a voice to those individuals who've been allegedly victims of illegal immigration. It's just so completely repulsive what he's doing right now, because he's essentially trying to make it seem like this is an epidemic and that, illegal immigration is one of our greatest problems. It is not one of our greatest problems. It is an issue that needs to be addressed in our government. It is an issue so we can make sure that we figure out a way to take care of all those people who are in the country, who have come here illegally, but have been, upstanding citizens the whole time. So it is a problem from that perspective. But it is not a problem in which you need to develop another agency in order to appease allegedly, some part of your base that thinks that, there's this huge, overwhelming, illegal immigration problem that's killing people and causing deaths all over the place. It's just not happening. There are victims. Why isn't he going and meeting with the families of people who died from gunshot wounds or who were killed in Chicago while he's constantly talking about it? But no, he's decided to make certain groups of people the enemy, such as mostly immigrants and Muslims. He's decided to make them the enemy, and so therefore any form of reason just doesn't matter. To create this new entity is basically saying we want to come after immigrants. And right now, the way that they're going after immigrants in this country is just repulsive. In addition to that, he also signed a basically anti-Clean Water Act. At the same time, he's talking about clean water during his speech before Congress. So this is the guy that pivoted. This is the great speech you guys are talking about. When you dissect the speech, what you heard was a sociopath that was able to con a bunch of people into thinking that he had changed. He takes an entire day off and pretends like he has nothing to say and says thank you and doesn't say anything else. And the reason why this guy hasn't said anything else is today or said anything else after that speech other than thank you is because he's trying to pretend to you, the victimized and abused individual, that he's turned a new leaf and that you should give him a second chance. How many times are you going to give somebody a chance to abuse you? This guy is not inspirational. Nothing he said was inspirational. I will say Ryan Owens' wife was the inspiration of the night. Period, point blank. There was no dispute about that. She inspires us all to be better people and to be able to deal with some of these very difficult situations that we go through in life and things that are outside of our control. She is just inspiring. But Donald Trump is not. Donald Trump is not a good person. He is not somebody who cares about the average American. He is not about bettering the United States of America. If he was about it, he would do that in his own life by bringing jobs that from overseas in his own companies back to the United States of America. So no, that speech was shit. Stop saying give him a chance. He told you yesterday that he was a liar. He lied 51 times in 61 minutes. That was not a pivot. That guy was not presidential. That was a speech by a narcissistic sociopath. And anybody who's buying into that, you're a fool. And you're being conned by the biggest con artist to ever run for politics in the United States of America. People need to wake up. That speech was unacceptable. The things that he's proposing are horrific. What he has done in the past is absolutely horrific. This guy does not get a pass. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our show today. Yes, we had to go over because it was Donald Trump craziness that always makes us go over. But I thank you so much. We will be back next Wednesday for another live and exciting and vibrant show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a good night. Take care.
come back and hear us live every Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern. www.blogtalkradio.com/Candor Talk Live. Check out our website for more articles on hot topics from a progressive's perspective.